All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. It's Mark here, and I have the opportunity to have as a guest today Kuldeep Kelkar. How are you today, Kuldeep?
I'm good, Mark. How are you this morning?
I am excellent. I'm really excited to have you on. We found each other at a recent conference, and we stumbled each other like, wait a minute, we have so much in common. One of the things that I was just enthralled is I have your book here, and I've had the
Thank
opportunity
you.
to reference it quite a few times. And I'd love to get into this as well, because I know that's one of your recent proud achievements. But I would love before we start, just could you tell everyone what is your current role in the, I guess, UX industry?
Yeah. Hey, thank you again, Mark. Honor to be a guest. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for referencing the book. To answer your question, my current role, I'm a partner at a company called UXReactor. So UXReactor, as the name suggests, we are a boutique design and research agency headquartered here in San Francisco. So that's where I'm based out of. I live in Cupertino, South Bay. And as you can see, my fancy background talks all about these days is user research, which has been my focus for the last 25 years. And so at UX Reactor, as a partner, I manage the line of business where we execute design and research for our enterprise customers. While we have customers across the board, our focus is more on enterprise customers, which are large organizations that have products that can be complicated over the number of years. We spend our time and energy simplifying things for our customers and their end users. So everything from upfront discovery research, day in a life, jobs to be done, ethnographic work to the bread and butter, which is multiple rounds of usability tests, design validation, all the way to benchmarking and everything in between is our hyper focused area.
Yeah, and you talked about it. User research is definitely something that many seem to underestimate. And then also you've got the other side, which it's test and learn cycle is going strong. So I'm glad that you kind of talked about the range of that. I know many also wonder, looking at your dossier or your background that you have here in your book, for not all those that have read the book and know your background, could you just share how you stumbled into this industry? You have a rather robust background, I would say.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, this was almost 30 years ago when my undergrad is industrial engineering. So I'm an engineer by education. But during my master's at Clemson, South Carolina, my focus was HCI, human computer interaction. The industrial engineering departments back then had the focus of human factors. That's where pretty much this industry got started post World War II. Eventually, it morphed in the 90s into HCI, human computer interaction. The late 99, early 2000 .com wave is what got me to the San Francisco Bay Area, um, because those times were really crazy times. I mean, in perspective, it still feels like a crazy time, and that's how I got started. My first job was consulting role within a company where user research was the focus. Eventually, I made my way to PayPal in 2004. Back then, PayPal was a much younger company. eBay had just acquired it, and I stayed there for almost 10 years. Learned a lot. I enjoyed every day that I was there. It was quite a growth experience for me personally, as the company was growing and as I was growing professionally. After 10 years, left PayPal, did some consulting at Tata Consultancy, then ended up joining User Zoom in 2015. So for those that are not familiar, User Zoom, now merged with user testing, are these SaaS platforms, software as a service platforms, that designers, product managers, researchers use to conduct research, to find participants, to execute on that research, to highlight those insights. So the 8 years I spent at UserZoom running the services org, again, hyper focused on providing research services to clients. So pretty much half of my professional life has been working within product teams. The other half has been in the consulting industry, all focused on UX. So I don't know if I stumbled into it. Maybe I did at some point in time, but it was a conscious choice, a choice that I made, I believe, at Clemson in the late 90s, to be hyper focused on this thing called human computer interaction, because it was a philosophical change for me. As an engineer, you just develop things, uh, but as a human factors professional, for the first time, books from Don Norman or Jacob Nielsen or others, like, maybe we should be talking about and thinking about who that end user is, what problems are they facing, and designed to fit the form and function of a human being. And that pulled me in, and I have never looked back 25 years on.
Yeah, it's an amazing span of time there.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'll say it again. That was an amazing span of time there. And you did mention books. So why don't we take just a side path for a minute and talk about your book? What what led to creating this?
Yeah. Hey, and I know you have a book as well, so we'll talk about we'll reference that in a minute as well. But let me answer your question. And so when we met, it was quite interesting. We have two daughters. We have a similar path. You have been in the industry for 30 plus years or something like that. You have a book. I had a book, so it was quite serendipitous at that lunch table. But to answer your question, what got me into the book? So I don't remember that there was a specific day when I woke up saying, "Hey, I should write a book." That I don't know that there was such a moment. But in the last 10 years, I have been publishing articles. So sometimes people ask, "Hey, I've been thinking about a book. What should I do?"
Mhm.
Like, writing a book is quite labor intensive. Right? Ask anyone that has written a book. It takes potential, sometimes months, years, to formulate the thoughts, organize it, go through the process of writing chapter after chapter, through the long editing process. I didn't start that way. I got started writing a bunch of articles, published them on LinkedIn, on the websites of forums of the companies that I was working for. And then after I had decided to leave user Zoom, user testing, I took a short career break. And then that's when I truly organized all my thoughts into a structure. It took a while. It took 3+ months to even get to the structure of the book. Now, the book, as the title suggests, strengthen your user research superpowers. So the analogy is that, hey, loads and loads of researchers and designers and people that are entering into the organization or have been working for a corporation generally find themselves struggling to influence the product roadmap, generally struggle to the common verb, the common term that gets used is, say, we want a seat at the table. We don't always get that seat at the table, and it's all related to influence. And in the last 20 odd years, I've seen highly successful researchers and designers, and other cohort which have been really talented but not great at influencing the outcome. And so I always try to figure out, hey, what distinguishes the great from the good? At its core, everyone has those skill sets, but what drives those influence skill sets? And that's how I got started with pretty much the headlines of each chapter, and then started writing one chapter at a time. The book can be read any chapter at any point in time. There's no, you don't have to start from chapter 1 and go to chapter 52. Each superpower largely stand on its own. Last point, I don't think everyone has to use all 52 superpowers at all times. You can use some in some quarters. Just be conscious that there's more than one way to get to that influence and drive and deliver that outcome. And not one chapter in the book actually talks about how to conduct research. I'm actually assuming that people know how to conduct research. That's not their biggest pain. Their biggest pain is, how do I influence the outcome? How do I influence the product teams? How do I influence the engineering teams? How do I make sure that the user-centered design mindset that I have gets implemented within the organization that I work for. So long-winded answer to your question.
Well, I appreciate the answer. What's interesting about that, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think as a reader of your book, totally makes sense because when I sat down with you and talked about it, I was like, oh, have you thought of an audio version? You're like, no, no, no. This is you read each section. So now it made sense after I did read it and go through it. And you're right. I mean, you need to apply these at certain points within your practice, and there's a lot of influence out there, and I really appreciate that. But that does lead me to my next question, though, which is linked integral to your book. But what have you done in your career? And there's
Mm.
a lot out there that have been thinking, should I get into this thing called UX, or should I transition somewhere inside this industry of UX? And a lot of it I've seen lately, there's a lot of negativity out there around UX. A lot of people say that, oh, that's a terrible application. But what have you done in your career to encourage a positive user experience for end users?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess those are there's two parts to that question, and one
Mhm.
which is what have I done, and then the state of the industry as well. So let's talk about the state of industry. Mark, both you and I have been in this industry for 2.5, 3 decades now, and we have seen the highs and the lows. And I saw the highs of the dot com, and then I saw the lows post dot com. Then I saw the highs in the early 2000s, and then after the financial crisis, it was, oh boy, are we going to exist or not? Right? And then saw the highs and then the lows, and then during COVID, there were massive investments in digital across the board. All digital roadmaps were probably that things that were on the roadmap but could have taken 5 years got crunched down within a 5 month time frame, and that potentially led to some overhiring and then some adjustments that happened in 23 and 24. So we have seen the highs and the lows. I have seen the highs and the lows, and uh, I'm not terribly worried about the UX profession. We might just be coming out of the low, and knock on wood, all indicators point to significant investments in 2025. We are all now going to figure out and ride this AI wave, generative AI in specific, and what does that mean for research? What does that mean for design? What does that mean for UX? What does it mean for software engineers? There's that in itself is a topic for conversation. To the other part of your question, what have I done to drive positive user experiences for end users? I think of it in two ways. One is how have I facilitated the organization that I work for to influence that end user outcome as a leader, as well as what have I done personally as a project, right? Hundreds and hundreds of usability tests, which is pretty much the core bread and butter for any user researcher. Loads and loads of insights. And as I argue in the book, there's always the what, so what, now what. There's a chapter on how to report insights, and I'll use that as an. So if as a designer or researcher, you talk about what you have done, that's great. You need to do that, right? Or if you conducted a research, what did you find is important. But more important is the so what. Why does this matter? To the organization, to the end user, articulate that story. Don't stop at what, answer the so what. But great researchers, great designers go a step further. They talk about now what? What do we do? That's where influence really comes in. So when you have this story that says, hey, we found this, we sized it to answer the so what, does this matter to the organization or to the end user? And then now what do we do? And conduct workshops and get people together. I strongly believe AI can do many things. What AI today cannot do is bring people together. So much of our time and energy gets spent on making sure that at least even in startups, you still have to get 5 people together. You might have to get 50 people together. You still have to get people together to focus on a specific problem. You have to make sure that they believe in that problem, that they believe in the solution, and that they want to carry it forward. That's where I have always tried to put my energy in. It's not about my individual design, my individual report. It's how did I influence the larger outcome for that end user? And that's how I have measured my success. That's how I have measured my team's success. And ultimately that leads you to get to a become a power player, an influential power player.
I love how you tackle that with looking at both sides of the picture, which there are a lot of individual contributors that think, well, I don't have to influence anything. I'm not a leader, but you always have to. And
Yeah.
I love how you brought that out. And I do like the framework that you referenced from your book too, which can really help with delivering quality reports because it's the insights giving in a timely manner that can help make those judgments that can push a project forward, which is so perfect.
Yeah.
But the thing you started talking about is the positive user experience. You kind of answered this question, but I'd love to delve a little bit deeper. Is why do you think it's so hard to create a positive user experience within an
Yeah.
application?
Yes. I mean that's a good question. I've pondered that for a while. Right? I mean the theory seems simple. So yet, why do we have so many applications day in, day out that are I've never met any team, I've never met any executive that intentionally wants their applications to be poorly designed. I've never met an executive that says, "Hey, we don't care about end users. We just want to deliver the worst possible design that's out there." I've never heard that. I'm sure many listeners have never heard that. Everyone has an intention. Every executive has an intention to be customer centric, user centric. On the other hand, we have designers and researchers, even talented product managers. I've met even engineers and engineering leaders who want that to happen. And what has baffled me for 20 years is that there is positive intentions, there's intentions on both sides, yet how come we have experiences that are so hard to deliver, or the end users have to face all the challenges that they face? The answer is, at least from my perspective, is that there are always competing priorities. There's business reality, there's investments, there are, I mean, I have been managing P&L, profit and loss, for the last 10 years. You are constantly bombarded with a whole lot of unknowns. You have to make every executive has to make a informed decision based on the data that they have, but as well as their gut and their forward looking vision. And I know researchers go, "Oh boy, you're a researcher. How can you talk about gut and not data?" I've lived in the world of data. I've never encountered a situation where the data just reveals the answer and tells you exactly what's going to happen 2 years from now. There's always unknowns. There's always some informed. And so. Uh, to answer your question, I think the world needs better designers, better researchers, executives that understand the ROI of their investments. The competitive pressures help them move in that direction. Loads and loads of companies just build something out to prove it out into the market, and if they are successful, then they have to go back and retrofit their quote unquote UI UX, right? And that has been the reality. It is very possible that that might continue to be the reality, but it's a great opportunity for everyone in the UX profession. And the last point would be, hopefully, AI generated interfaces improve the baseline for future forward-looking software applications, where even the not so great experiences are much better than today's not so great experiences. But we'll see. We'll know within the next 3 years.
Well, we definitely will. That has been a hot topic, I know, everywhere about artificial intelligence and how that's going to impact everything. But you said, I started writing down some things when you were talking there. I love the competing priorities because, as we know, with the famous Venn diagram, we we have all those competing priorities, and that seems to kind of encroach the positivity of an experience. But then also you talked about there's a lot of unknowns. And then we always used to joke about, well, what about the unknown knowns or the known unknowns? You go down those paths. But I like that better designers and researchers and UX professionals understanding the ROI. And that business discussion seems to happen a lot when we're talking with UX professionals that you really need to understand that business side to succeed. And I think that was a lot of the points that you also, to call out your book again, it seems as though there's a lot of points in there that, speaking the same language seem to come out.
Yeah, yeah. I'll add. I mean, there's actually several chapters in the book that focus on this. Just saying, hey, ROI is important is not enough. I have encouraged my teams uh, where I would ask them to see. It takes a while to understand these numbers. What's revenue? What's gross margin? What's an EBITDA? What was the growth rate? Um, Millions, billions. We in our day-to-day life, we don't deal with EPS, earnings per share, right? It's not something that unless you make a conscious effort, and I'm largely speaking to UXers, unless you make a conscious effort to sit down, jot these things down. There's even a workbook in the book that says, okay, write these things down in your team meetings, talk about it. It takes a while to be confidently talking about these things rather than just saying arbitrarily, oh, let's do this, conversion will improve. Be articulate about it. So, hey, today the conversion is X%. Our hypothesis is if we do this, our conversion will improve by Y percentage. It's a belief that, and then we'll run some A/B tests and get there. The more quantitative your language is, the easier it will be for the organization to hear you out when you're qualitatively speaking something. The more respect you'll have from the organization if you confidently talk about the company's numbers. And again, it takes practice. Intent alone is not enough. You have to think through, write it. I write these numbers down, then I speak with someone about it. By the third time I'm talking about it, in my own brain, I have quantified the X millions to Y billions to the growth rate to the EPS. And so the more you talk about these things amongst your team in a safe space, the more confident I've found designers and researchers to be in team meetings then across the organization. And that just adds to the credibility, even when you're not speaking numbers.
Great points. And what's interesting is it's that kind of practice makes perfect, but then making it tangible, which is important. And that does lead me to another question. So, the purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration to those that are looking to get into user experience, or maybe they're in and they want to move into another segment of user experience. What advice would you give to people that are looking to be advocates for end users and get into the space?
Yeah, either get into the space or move higher within the organization if you already are a UXer. I guess I'll start with I have 52 superpowers in the book. All of them are geared towards improving your individual's ability to influence the organization and ultimately be that successful advocate for the end user. Mark, I've been going to UPA, UXPA, and UX conferences for last 20 years. The UX profession, there might be 3, 4 million of us out there in the world. My guesstimate based on some queries on LinkedIn. Almost 100% of them already believe that they should be focused on end users and do what's right for the end users. That's in our DNA. I've not met very many UXers who say, I don't care about the end users. Right? That is part of the belief system. We want to advocate for the end users. I know for sure every executive wants that. And so the only missing part is the competing priorities. Right? It's not just advocating for end users, it's successfully advocating for end users needs a whole lot of skills, individual skills, influencing the organization skills, leadership skills, and a continuous growth, continuous learning mindset skills. Right? The four sections of the book, the 13 chapters in each one of them, are hyper focused on how, assuming that you want to advocate for end users, assuming that you want to be successful at your workplace, assuming that you want to get to the outcomes for the end users, these are the superpowers that you need to hone and build and strengthen to get to that outcome, because you can alone cannot do it all. You have to influence people to get to that outcome.
I love that. You can't do it alone. And that is something that's interesting is that we have a role that fits in with others. And then that's an influence of making sure that you're thinking ahead, you're doing some discovery planning, you're keeping the user's perspective in mind, along with the business and the technical constraints and all of those things. Great advice for those that are within the industry or looking in. And I also wondered if you had any other just parting words before we conclude our podcast. I really thought there was some really great things that you said in there that everyone should go back and reflect upon. And obviously, there's some other resource that we mentioned that folks can discover more information.
Yeah, go buy the book. It's available on Amazon. But joking aside, yeah, this is hard. This is if anyone that's listening, if you find yourself in a position that, hey, I want the organization to do these things because they are right, then know that you're not the only one. Many of us have faced that. Almost all of us have faced that. Interestingly enough, it's not just the UX profession. If you talk to product managers, if you talk to engineers, they all want to influence the organization. So this is not a this I don't believe this is just a UX thing. We just think it's a UX thing, but it's not. At the end of the day, influencing a broad group of people is a skill set that all of us need. Last parting advice I would say is assume that everyone wants to be customer centric. Everyone in the organization wants to be user centric. Just means different things for different people. And so give them the benefit of the doubt, work with others. Uh, you'll find your experiences to be positive as a result of that. You'll enjoy the work more, and you'll have the ultimate goal of doing great things for end users as an outcome. So yeah, best of luck. Uh, Keep trying. It that's all we can do.
Great advice. And for anyone that wants to find more information about what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, LinkedIn is generally the best way. It's very easy to find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Kuldeep Kelkar and you'll be able to find it. There's also the book details, and some free chapters are available on https kuldeepkelkar.com. Fairly easy to remember. Just type my name in. If nothing else, search my name on Google and you'll find all the resources.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Kuldeep.
Thank you, Mark.